Hi, everyone. My name is Nicholas Timoshuk. I am CEO of YouFuture. YouFuture is a Ukrainian holding company, an investment group with assets evaluated today of around 500 million US dollars and with a total market cap of our portfolio companies of above $1 billion. And apart from my daily job at YouFuture, I'm privileged to be in the organizing committee and supervising board of Kyiv International Economic Forum. For those of you who might not have heard or know, Kyiv International Economic Forum is the biggest economic event in Ukraine, but not just about Ukraine. It's a truly international event that is taking place in Kyiv every year, and it really gathers thousands of people from all over the world, outstanding speakers from the world of politics, business, scholars, social influencers, you name it, all of those who shape today, who shape the reality. And for more than 5 years, it has been bringing amazing events and personalities to Kyiv. And using this, this unfortunate situation that the world is facing today, the coronavirus pandemic, the imminent global recession, and us actually having to work from home all over the world. The entire world is effectively on quarantine. Together with Kyiv International Economic Forum, we decided to hold a series of online interviews with distinguished speakers of Kyiv International Economic Forum. And today is one of the first of such interviews. And it is my pleasure and honor to be interviewing today Mr. Артуро Бріс. Am I pronouncing it correctly, Arturo?
Бріс, perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, Артуро Бріс, who is a professor of finance at IMD Business School in Switzerland. And Arturo is one of the greatest scholars and most renowned professionals in finance today in the world. I'm sure, Arturo, you are in high demand today. So once again, thank you for sparing time, for finding opportunity to talk to us. I'm sure you must be giving a lot of interviews these days. And I know that you have some really unique insights and perspective on what's going on, but forgive my being not too original here, but definitely our viewers and whoever is interested in watching this interview will not forgive me if I don't ask you this question of, so you might already be sick of it. How do you assess the current economic situation, current recession, current crisis that is already obvious? And namely, how bad is it going to get in your personal opinion? Have we already hit the bottom? Are we just only starting to descend? Is it going to be as bad in 2008 or better? Please elaborate for a few minutes if you can.
Yes, obviously it is very difficult to say how it is going to evolve because it all depends on medical improvements because we are going through a healthcare crisis and pandemic. So having said that, it is true that as we state today, the damage to the world economy is already significant, and we're going to be suffering for at least the next 2 quarters because of the paralysis of the economic activity, global trade, lack of supply, lack of demand. So we have already in a difficult economic situation. Have we touched bottom? You know, when you look at financial markets today, they are starting to recover. You never know what is going to happen in the US, for example, but they have started to recover from the last week that was the worst week in stock markets since the 1920s. So to me, it seems that financial markets have already priced everything that could happen, but still, you know, there are certain black clouds in the horizon, and as long as the pandemic continues its normal course, I think markets have already priced everything. Okay, but in conclusion, I think we are going to be confronted with a harsh economic condition in the coming months.
But you still think that basically the financial markets have already factored in the worst case scenarios, and that in terms of all the indexes in Europe, Asia, and the US, we are near the bottom, or we have hit the bottom. Is that your assumption?
Yes, it seems so. I think that markets are moving a lot by sentiment and by perceptions that not very often represent current reality. And in some cases, I feel that the market is overreacting, not underreacting. So hopefully, and I think this hope comes also from analysis, hopefully we have touched bottom.
Well, that's really encouraging. That's encouraging. Let's hope for that. Now, Arturo, I know you have a somewhat unique perspective in respect to what happened with value stocks. You even have voiced an opinion. You have written certain materials that say that we might have seen the end of value stocks. Could you please explain, like, to general public in a very simple and comprehensive manner, what is value stock, what is a growth stock, and why it is so unprecedented that value stock seem to have lost more value in this recession than growth stock, and why did it happen?
Yes, the distinction between value stocks and growth stocks is traditional in stock markets, and it is very simple and actually quite intuitive difference. You have two types or two classes of stocks. On the one hand, you have growth stocks, companies that are going to grow into the future and whose value today is still not tangible, companies where the market expects a lot of developments coming from innovation. Typically, these are technology platforms. For example, Tesla is a growth stock. Uber is a growth stock. Even Alphabet, Google are growth stocks. Okay, but not all growth stocks are technology companies. Healthcare and pharmaceuticals tend to be growth. Okay. On the other extreme, you have what we call value companies. Value companies are those who have reached their peak of their investment cycle. These are already old companies, well established. They're profitable. They don't necessarily have huge growth opportunities, but they are profitable today. Okay? As we would say in Switzerland, you are milking the cow to give the profits to investors. And this is so because these companies have already established capacity and they have their factories and produce and sell. Tobacco, consumer goods, they tend to be value stocks. Those stocks, they are called value because they are high quality companies. They are reliable. Now, what has happened in the last year, which has been interesting, is that growth stocks have performed better than value stocks. And why is this surprising? Because traditionally what happens is that value stocks, again, a tobacco company or a consumer goods company, tend to be cheap in the market. So because they are cheap, they tend to have higher returns. So they perform better in the market. Okay? While growth stocks are already expensive. What happened last year is that, probably for the first time, growth stocks have outperformed value stocks. They have done better in the market. The market likes growth. Okay? And that's why I claim this to be the end of growth, the end of value. Okay? Now, what is interesting about the current crisis is that what you have seen in the last 3 months is that if you mark a difference, if you just analyze the performance of different classes, it turns out that the stocks that did best during the past month and during the past 2 months have been growth stocks relative to value. What does this mean? This means that in the current environment, investors are buying those companies that are going to pay in the future, not today. And this is because, in my opinion, I think markets see the light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, we're going to come out of this crisis, and when we come out, the companies that are going to perform well are technology companies, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies, because they grow in the future. While the companies that are, quite established, old, that have been profitable to date, are not in favor of markets, are not accepted by investors, and that's a problem because these companies will need to reinvent themselves. That's what I call the end of value, and that's an interesting phenomenon. Okay, typically in financial crisis, investors want safety. So if I'm confronted with a lot of uncertainty, I don't want to invest in Tesla. I prefer to invest in Unilever, okay, because it's safer. Today, the opposite is happening, which I think is quite interesting, again, because investors are looking much more into the future.
This is very interesting indeed, and unprecedented. When on the one hand, it says that investors are clearly hopeful and inspired by the future, right? They still believe that those companies are going to drive the future, the tech companies, the companies that present opportunities for growth, but nevertheless, they do not prefer, even in the turbulent crisis times, well-established cash-generating companies. This is indeed surprising. Now, but what does it tell to an investor? Should I, for instance, still buy some of the value stocks, maybe after the crisis as a second wave of investment, do those stocks still present interest? Are they still lucrative from the standpoint of stock investing?
Yes, that would be Warren Buffett's recipe. Warren Buffett says you should invest when there is fear. And one of the aspects of the crisis is that, as I said earlier, there's panic and overreaction. So value stocks in particular, they have suffered a lot, presumably irrationally as well, because investors are getting rid of them. So from a short-term perspective as an investor, it's very wise to invest into those stocks because they're extremely undervalued, underpriced. So they're going to rebound as the economy recovers. But, the market says not for the very long run. So as a long-term investment, they are not interesting. As a short-term investment, certainly they are.
Interesting. Thank you, Arturo. Thank you for this insight. This is indeed once again unprecedented and something new each time that with each new crisis, each new turn, stock market, which seems to have been studied and overstudied by everyone around the world, still keeps surprising us.
And let me add something also that I find interesting, because I'm already old enough to have lived through several crises. And the typical investment advice that you hear from asset managers and private bankers when it comes to a situation like today is diversify your portfolio. An asset manager will say, in a time of crisis, it's very important to diversify away your portfolio. Okay? And I completely disagree with that, because something that we know, and we have studied that for many years already, is that diversification is least available when most needed, which is today. That is, today, you want diversification, but there is no diversification. So the reason why this is the case is if you look at markets in the last month, everything moves together. Whenever a market goes down, everything goes down. Whenever a market goes up, everything goes up. So there is no diversification to speak of. And in fact, diversification is extremely difficult to find. So of course, diversification is good, but it's good when it exists. And today is very difficult. That's why, to me, as a wise investment recipe, it's much more important to be selective. And especially in the current environment, to focus on the right sectors, on the right industries, and on the right asset classes, to make a wise investment, rather than trying to put every egg in a different basket.
This is very insightful, and true. Actually, it's a valuable takeout for me, because you're right. When we've been watching this market for the last several weeks, and what we have seen is that suddenly everybody drops stocks, corporate stocks, and runs away from stocks into bonds. Then, at the same time, everybody drops bonds, again losing money, second time after losing money after dropping stocks, they run away into cash because they are waiting for the bottom and waiting for the opportunity to start buying at the bottom. So you're right. Everybody is basically moving with the crowd. Everybody's doing the same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's you can figure it out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. So let's move a bit from the financial world, from stock market and from finances, into something that is, more mundane and literally affects people's lives and destinies of the government and of us all. Now, you probably have seen that over the last decade, or maybe even more, there has been a certain demarche on globalization. Mm-hmm. And in your opinion, with this, or after this, both healthcare and economic crisis, will the demarche on globalization continue, ramp up, or slow down? Because on the one hand, the healthcare crisis, the pandemic, shows us that without international cooperation, without globalization in this area, there's no safe country or safe haven in the world. Nobody's protected, nobody is safe. At the same time, we see that governments have been and are still, at least in their when they're voicing their opinion, at least publicly, are leaning towards nationalism, towards protection of borders, economic self-interest, and so on. This crisis, will it change the situation? What's going to happen to globalization, in your opinion?
Yes, as you will say, the trend toward deglobalization already started a few years ago. And this means that from the geopolitical point of view, we see that governments are becoming more and more important and determining winners and losers. From the investment perspective, what it means is that country portfolios are much more relevant than industry portfolios, for example. So this phenomenon has already started. And obviously the COVID-19 pandemic is going to accelerate it, in the sense that we have realized the fragility of our global economy. We are moving back to a retreat culture in which we will focus a lot into our local supply chains, local markets, local customers, local talent. And we're going to build economic borders more and more to protect ourselves from the risks that come from abroad. And this will accelerate this process of deglobalization. But remember also that deglobalization also appealed to this idea that the global forces will become less important in favor of individual companies' performance. Facebook or Apple or Alibaba. I think that what the coronavirus crisis is showing us is that deglobalization is not happening in favor of companies, but it's happening in favor of countries and in favor of governments. But as I said today, governments and countries are going to be much more important than ever before.
That's interesting. So what should international companies do? I mean, look, realistically, the world's biggest business, be it Chinese business or American business or Russian business or Ukrainian business, cannot grow and develop confined within the territory of its own country or even the closest neighborhood. Big companies and big countries need global markets. This is obvious. Otherwise, we're just putting global economic growth to an end. And correct me if I'm wrong. So in this case, what will those global companies do?
But we have been very careless when it comes to protecting our trading and communication routes. We have thought that the world was an open market space, that there were no walls anymore, that borders did not exist. And we have not realized that there are major risks involved in outsourcing production, in buying supplies from China, in exporting to the United States, and so on. So we are going to actually be much more careful and manage our risks in a much clever way. I give you one example that I read this morning in the financial press. Switzerland, the country where I live, because of its geographical position and because of its history, has this culture of accumulating supplies in case of need. So when this crisis has hit, it turns out that there is no scarcity of food or pharmaceutical supplies in the country because there is a governmental department that is in charge of storing the necessary supplies for 6 months period. Okay, that's what I call risk management. Being aware of such a risk, the Swiss culture, created this idea of protection and prevention, and that's why we have been so anticipating when it comes to the crisis. And I think the same is going to happen with countries. As you say, the Ukraine, for example, Ukraine needs to still export its agricultural products, and it relies a lot on European markets. So this will continue, but with a different risk management approach. Again, realizing that there can be a massive disruption in our supply chain and trade routes, and then we need to anticipate those potential disruptions.
It's very good that you mentioned Ukraine. Well, I mentioned Ukraine and then you did, because in your opinion, where does a country like Ukraine, and Ukraine in particular, stand in this new world, new environment? What do you think we should be doing today to ensure we have a better, safer, wealthier future? And how do you see Ukraine from the macroeconomic perspective today in this new paradigm, new reality that we're entering?
It's nice that you asked me about Ukraine, because it's a market and a country that I love, and I know because I've been there very often, as you well know. I think that Ukraine has a privileged geographical position nowadays. It is placed in the center of the world. That is, the center of gravity of the world economy has moved towards east, and now lies between Europe and China, and between Western Europe and China. And then Ukraine is in the middle. So that geographical position needs to be an advantage. And it's going to be an advantage again because Ukraine lies in the middle of the Silk Road. It's also an advantage because we have access to markets that are much closer to what the average country would have. And I think Ukraine needs to focus, number one, on creating value-adding industries and products, and that particularly refers to the agricultural sector, and then continue investing in infrastructure and education. One of the differentiators of Ukraine, as any other Eastern European economy, is its talent. And I think talent has to be used as a competitive advantage, but also physical infrastructure needs a revamp. Roads, highways, airports, but also access to water and utilities, and most of all, scientific infrastructure. I think with the focus on those two pillars, the Ukrainian economy is highly promising.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for this ray of optimism. I share it, actually. I share it. I agree with you that the global centers of business activity and of economic drive and growth definitely have shifted over the last decades. And more countries and new countries have opportunities now, and Ukraine amongst one of them. We just have to use it wisely and have to navigate also skillfully to weather this storm that is imminent, that is already all over us. Thank you. Now, Arturo, just moving aside from business and from all the professional activity, all that you and I have been discussing and everything that we read in the press today or social media or actually anywhere is quite stressful, right? We already, I think, have been living quite stressful and busy and hectic lives, but now it's even more of that. How do you relieve that stress? Do you have any hobbies that help you to go through this situation, this time of turbulence and stress?
Yes. When it comes to times like this, I think to me it's an advantage that I'm a person with a lot of routines. So I have built many habits throughout my life. So a confinement like this one is quite easy. And my trick is basically to repeat always the same things, to always do sports, to read a lot, to just follow a working routine, to try to do the same things that I used to do, and also to do many things, not just work, but try to do many things, music, again, reading, doing sports, and then in that way, actually time goes by, and then you don't feel any solitude, and you don't feel that you are confined in a small space.
That's an excellent piece of advice. So you play music. What instrument do you play?
I play bass guitar. Okay.
Bass guitar.
Yes, bass guitar is the instrument for happy men, and because
Why is that? Why not regular guitar?
Regular guitar is much more fun. I don't know. Bass guitar gives you a pleasure. The problem is that playing bass without the band is very difficult, and of course this time I don't have anybody to play with, so I have to play with the with music on the background. But I'm sure that you do the same.
Yeah. I actually, that's what I wanted to show you. I share your passion. See, this is my Martin acoustic guitar. Sounds amazing, and it helps.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. It's great. It's good to have a guitar close by, to.
Oh yeah. It's actually for me. It's also part of meditation, because when I was young and ambitious and I wanted to play the best I could, practice made me boring. I detested practice. I couldn't bear it because you had to repeat the same thing all over and over again. And now it's like a meditation. Now it helps. Now you can just let your mind go, relieve yourself, and just repeat one thing after the other, and it really helps. First of all, you hone on your technique. Secondly, you relieve your mind.
Yes,
that's a good. Do you have favorite bands of musicians in general?
Sorry, say that again.
Do you have favorite bands of musicians?
Oh yes, you know, I'm an old guy, so my favorite band of all time has been Supertramp, but I also like bands like Coldplay a lot. I like people like Bruno Mars,
Wow,
Bastille.
very contemporary.
Typically also British pop music tends to be my favorite.
Have you heard the latest album by Coldplay?
Yes, yes, of course.
Oh, it's amazing.
I follow them. Yes, I've
That's
seen
amazing.
I think Coldplay at least 4 times live.
Really? Wow, lucky you. I haven't myself yet. But you know what? I don't know whether you know this musician, but this is my favorite bloke musician for the last couple of decades is John Mayer.
Oh, of course. Yes, your body is a wonderland. Yes.
Yes. Actually, that piece that I played, it was one of his songs, White Georgia, from his first album.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw him in Amsterdam last year, and it was mind-blowing. Yeah, he's an outstanding musician and performer. Fantastic. You know, it's great that we have this, as you say, routines and hobbies, and actually taste for life. Because I think taste for life is one thing that will get us through this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Arturo, now you pointed out that you actually have a routine and you're in confinement now. You're working from home, same as I do, same as I think most of the planet does today. My question is, how do you find it? Is it easier or more difficult than working from the office? And what do you make of it? What do you think companies and workforce and people will do after the crisis? Will they rush to the office because they're going to be sick of their homes? Will they get used to it and actually stay homes? Because then it has implications on all other industries, on real estate, on transport, on businesses as such. What is your perception of that?
Yes. Starting by the end, I think we are entering into a new phase in which the changes that were implemented today, they don't have a return. So we are massively moving into working from home. We're going through a transformation that we thought it would take longer to happen, and now it's happening in a question of weeks. And certainly we're not going to go back to the old days in which we all go to the office every day, because we have realized that actually it's very easy to work from home. Okay. For me, it's difficult because my normal work consists of a lot of traveling. So I spend half of my days abroad or in a plane. So certainly that's a big disruption, because as I'm not traveling, you know, I can have to do something completely different. So whether I'm at home or in my office, life is already different without traveling. I think at home, of course, you have the advantage of more flexibility. There are many things that you can do. There are more solitude, especially if you don't have kids around. But at the same time, there are more distractions. Okay? And what I appreciate a lot is, and it's something that is going to be visible in many organizations, is that how all the useless bureaucracy in organizations is going to be removed, because now we cannot just meet every 10 minutes for something different. You know, if we meet, we need to organize the meeting. We need to be very efficient. We need to speak for 10 minutes and then move on. We cannot just organize meetings that go for about 3 hours. And that I like, because we're becoming more efficient. I think as organizations, we're going to realize that there is much more efficiency by keeping the distance, because we are close to each other, and you and I are talking as if we were in front of each other.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have the physical distance that removes this useless bureaucracy that I find is a great achievement.
You know, it's a very right, I would say, opinion or conclusion, because I've heard from several people already, from both my colleagues, from some of the co-owners and managers of our portfolio companies, and also from some of the top managers of the leading businesses here in Ukraine, like some banks, for instance. One of the top managers of a prominent international bank in Ukraine said, you know what? I could have never imagined that over 1 week, you can just take the entire huge bank home to work online. Because whenever we try to do it during different periods of time or for cost-cutting reasons, everybody was objecting. Everybody said it wouldn't work, that we had risks, that people would be demotivated, that it would be impossible to perform certain tasks. Well, guess what? The banks is operating, and perfectly well. People working from home, at least most of the people. And another co-owner of one of our portfolio companies said exactly what you pointed out. He echoed your impression that people were preparing for meetings in a much better way. Meetings were shorter, more efficient, straight to the point. There was no blah, 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 because you had limited time. You needed to prepare, and you need to broadcast your message clearly and eloquently, because you did not have a luxury of sitting next to the person in the room and casting on your emotional and presence impression. You could only broadcast and transmit the piece of information that you needed to be heard. And this is amazing, because as you said, we were all obsessed with personal experience. You need to see the person, you need to shake his or her hand, you need to be in the room, you need to convince. Well, guess what? The world is working even like this. I mean, nobody, of course, is diminishing personal contact or encounter or travel. I think that will not be replaced anytime soon. People will still want and need to travel, but remote offices and remote teams seem to be working perfectly fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have been forced to change, and that change is, has been faster than we expected.
Absolutely. Arturo, well, I thank you very, very much indeed for sparing us your time. A really fascinating talk, but I do not dare to hold you back any longer. I hope that we can stay in touch and, sometime talk once again, be it for the interview or for other purposes. And I hope very much that you will find time and opportunity to visit Kiev and actually attend and speak at Kiev International Economic Forum this year. It's going to take place this fall. Hopefully no more surprises in any of the areas of our life pops up by that moment, but you never know. Exactly. Thank you once again, Артуро Бріс, professor of finance at IMD Business School, and me, Nicholas Timoshuk, CEO of Your Future. This has been recorded exclusively and specially for Kiev International Economic Forum and for everybody else who's interested in economics, in finance, in business, and in life in general. Thank you so much, Arturo. Have a great day and take care. Stay healthy and safe.
Good luck to everybody in Ukraine. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Good luck, Switzerland. Bye-bye.